Everyone, and a very warm welcome from Lahore, Pakistan to our global audience. On behalf of Beacon House School System, the organizer of School of Tomorrow events, I would like to welcome you all to A World of Tomorrow from Darkness to Light, the 12th edition of SOT events, which is fully virtual. The not-for-profit SOT event series was launched by Beacon House in the year 2000 as part of its CSR and to help inform the direction of the organization while also engaging global communities in conversations shaping the future of schools and societies. My name is Afshan Khalid, and I'm your moderator for this session. I head the school evaluation unit at Beacon House and have been part of Beacon House since 2011. It is my great pleasure to welcome you today to this live session at the 12th edition of SOT events. We have an esteemed panel of experts today who will reflect on issues of critical importance in the field of education in light of Sir Ken Robinson's vision. Joining us today are Ms. Cris Rowan, CEO, Sunshine Coast Occupational Therapy and Zone in Programs, a pediatric occupational therapist, biologist, author of Virtual Child, and international speaker. Cris is passionate about changing the ways in which we raise and educate our children. Her background in health care has positioned her as a small but powerful voice in the wilderness in her tireless advocacy of educational reform. Welcome, Cris.
Thank you.
We have Mr. Lee Daley. Mr. Lee is the co-founder and chairman of Hello Genius, a platform facilitating self-guided learning journeys for children. A noted visionary thinker, innovator, and creative brand and communications strategist, Lee has brought new life to brands such as Apple, Microsoft, MSN, American Express, and many more. Welcome, Lee.
Yeah, good morning. Well, hello.
Good morning thank you for joining us from New York. And Cris has joined us from British Columbia, Canada. Our third guest today is Jim Knight, the Right Honourable Lord Jim of Weymouth, former Minister of State for Schools, UK. Jim works in education, digital technology, and as a legislator too. He's the Chief Education Advisor at TESS Global Limited, advising on key strategic partnerships. Welcome, Jim, to this panel. Thank you for joining us from UK.
Thank you very much.
And our final guest on the panel is Professor Dr. Graus, OBE. Professor Graus has been associated with Kidzania since 2017. He was the founding chief executive of the Children's University and continues to work with organizations globally, including the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, the Council of Europe, the World Bank, as well as Legoland Discovery Education. We welcome you, Dr. Graus.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We are really happy to have a large global audience this evening and look forward to the opportunity to talk to the stellar cast of this panel titled Keeping Creativity Alive, a tribute to Sir Ken Robinson. It is a tremendous pleasure to have you all here with us today, especially as you all have joined from different time zones and as early as 6 a.m. for Cris, and so on and so forth. Let me give you a little background to this session where we are aiming to pay tribute to Sir Ken Robinson. Sir Ken Robinson, a world-renowned thinker on education innovation, who passed away in August 2020, walked onto a stage in February 2006 and delivered a speech that remains the most popular TED Talk ever, now with 66.3 million views on the TED channel, translated into 62 languages, and millions more views on YouTube. Sir Ken Robinson's career was focused on changing schools so that they nurture creativity in children through introduction, that is, creativity in children through instruction. I'm sorry for that. That is personalized and customized for communities where students live. This tribute will look back at the work of Sir Ken Robinson and reflect on how his work can shape the educational landscape. Before we delve deeper into our topic, I would request our viewers to share their comments and questions on SOTEvents.com website, Facebook, or YouTube at any time during the session. I will put them up to our panelists in about 30 minutes after the discussion. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our corporate sponsor, UBL, for sponsoring and making such events possible. So with no further ado, I will ask Cris to take my first question. Cris, how can schools put creativity at the heart of each child's learning journey?
I'd like to give you two responses. The first one is we need to ask the children and we need to listen to what they tell us. The second one is that we need to unplug and go outside and play. So asking the children, I did this very thing last night. I phoned my godchildren, Charlie and Hannah, who are twins, and they're 12. And Charlie had a huge vision for how to build creativity in schools. And I want to just tell you what he said, because I listened and it was amazing. He said classrooms should have 2 levels, and there should be an elevator between, or an escalator between the 2 levels. And they should learn on one level and they should play on the other level. And I asked him why the escalator, and he said, because escalators are fun. And he said, and there should be trampolines and swimming pools and skateboard parks, and we should get to play. And I asked him about tests, and he said, oh, no tests. He said, we should do projects instead. And I said, well, how would we give you grades? Because he did actually say grades were important. He said that they should be looked at as how well they cooperate with each other during the projects that they're doing. So whenever I am stumped or I'm thinking that what I'm doing isn't working, I always stop and ask the kids. I've developed whole programs around what the kids tell me. And I think the whole democratic school concept could be really, really useful when we're looking at building creativity into the schools. The second issue that I'm seeing is a huge over-reliance on screens and an under-emphasis on some of the things that build health, mental and physical health and social. And, kids need to move and touch and to connect with other humans and be in nature to grow and succeed and to have optimal development of their bodies and brains. And so when we rely too much on screens and not enough on those 4 critical factors for growing a successful child, then we get into trouble. And that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing kids that are mentally and physically sicker than they've ever been. So with my healthcare focus, I'd like to encourage educators to look at the downside, the perils of the screens. Like, we all know screens have huge promise, but we need to balance the use of screens with the engagement in healthy activities in our classrooms, gyms, recess, homes, communities. And there's very simple ways to do that with outdoor schools. So this is something that is evidence-based, and I would love to see us move forward in that area.
Thank you, Cris. Kim, would you like to enlighten us with your views on this? Can schools prioritize creative skills over numeracy and literacy skills?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I obviously agree with a lot of what Cris says, but I'd say we also need to listen to parents, and it's been interesting. I've seen quite a lot of polling that's been taking place recently, and through this pandemic, parents have got a bit closer to their children and their learning because they've had to. And what the surveying says is that a lot of parents believe that teachers are only interested in tests. And I don't think that's true, but I do think that parents want the whole child to be educated, not just the knowledge acquiring, brain bit of the child. And Ken talked a lot about that. And the accusation that he rightly made was that we were educating people only from the neck up. And he talked about education needing to help all of us find our element. And that's where we've got to go. We've got to go and rebalance things. In conversations with teachers who have done an amazing job during the pandemic, the risks that they've taken in order to keep an education service going and the way they've had to adapt has been extraordinary. But I do hear a lot of talk about neuroscience, and that's great. Knowledge is still important. It's still important that people can read and write and have a framework of understanding of the world to apply to things. But they don't talk enough about social and emotional learning. They're talking a little bit more now because there's a lot of worry about well-being as kids are coming back into learning. But we need to get into that, and we need to think more about how we equip young people to be job ready. And all of that means a more holistic education that plays to some of the creativity that Ken talked about. It plays to the performing arts, the creative arts, to sport. That's how you learn some of those 21st century skills that everyone goes on about, that our employers expect young people to have and for them to be job ready so that they're able to communicate and collaborate and lead and follow and do all of those things that we've all heard about and that normally begin with the letter C. We need all of that to happen. And I am passionate about the need to rebalance our education system so that it educates the whole child, not just from the neck up.
Thank you. I totally agree with you. Lee, you come from a creative industry. How do you understand creativity, and what can we learn about it from other industries?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Let me give you a parallel. The advertising industry has a creative department. I would not say it's a creative industry. It sells creative solutions to clients for very particular problems, and so that creativity is very narrowly channeled. There isn't a lot of organic, what I would call human creativity in the world of advertising. And the interesting thing here is how one thinks about creativity. I think about it as fundamental a part of our physiology and our makeup as human beings, as our blood. And the issue is that when you frustrate creativity or you compartmentalize it or you restrict it, you kind of suffocate the potential in a human being. If you go back, your question, in the ad business, I've been involved in many creative industries actually across kind of film production and all kinds of things. What creativity does, it gives us the ability to tell stories and express emotion and to also express our individuality. And I think that that's what's really important when it goes back to Ken's message. And, Ken, to his great credit, was talking about this many years before he did his TED Talk. I met him in Berlin in 2000 when he gave a speech for me at a conference. And Ken's overall thesis was that the way society works, the way that formal schooling works, suffocates the potential of the individual child, and that every child and every human being in the world is very different. And what he believed that education needed to do was to find the means and the mechanisms to identify individuality and to identify what was unique in every child. As he said, children are as multifarious as there are individuals in the world. They are diverse, they are rich in talent. And for every Picasso, there's a Martha Graham. And for every Martha Graham, there's someone who enjoys doing gardening. And so, creativity is something that is often misunderstood, actually. And if we think about creativity as something that exists within every child, the role of people who are involved in the institutional management of that child, which is really what education is right now, has to understand that we're doing children a disservice unless we can allow themselves to express themselves fully. So we identify that individuality. The lack of ability to do that leads to many problems in society, and it leads to a complete underutilization of the pool of talent that a society has. The interesting thing with the world now is actually we do have the tools, and some of them, Cris, are technology-based, to be able to have a much more sensitive, fluid understanding of every child, and also to allow technology to understand how to optimize the physical development of the human being as well. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think we have to think about creativity as a life force and not something that's kind of weird and that needs to be compartmentalized or managed. What we have to do is allow it to flow and to bring empathy and understanding to what creativity is for each individual in the world and each child in a classroom.
I think that was very well put together. And yes, creativity for every child is different. Children can only aspire to what they know exists. Dr. Graus, your thoughts on how schools can optimize on creativity in their relevant contexts. So doesn't context play a role in creativity?
Always is the answer. I'd just like to take a few steps, please, and a few bits out of your question, really. One, just to go back to Lee's point, I think we need to engage ourselves. So if I'm in a school, I need to engage myself in that school with my colleagues and the whole constituency and community of the school, how we actually define the word creativity, but almost like back to the dictionary, because there is a danger in the institution that is school, that in a very simplistic way, creativity will be seen as the art lesson, a bit of clay and a paintbrush. Right, that's creativity done, next. And we need to really think about what that means. So that first and foremost. Then you asked about context, and the context of the child and the context of the school is always relevant. And you might argue that the child who is in a school in a severely disadvantaged area, it is more challenging to engage with the creativity agenda in those institutions for a number of reasons. One is because the experience field and the experience menu of the child is often more limited, and in equity terms, you need more building blocks to create confidence levels, to express yourself creatively in whatever shape or form. And I think the other thing is that those schools as institutions are quite often, and there's something quite wrong and ironic in this, they are the institutions that are being prevented from being creative because they perform poorly in absolute national terms. For example, they are forced down certain routes and certain behaviors that almost does not allow them to be creative. And I think, so if I'm in that school, I would want to be creative. I would need to define creative, and I'd need to define who in my constituency, who in my community is a contributor and a facilitator of that creativity. And invariably, I need to begin to ask the question, who is the teacher and what do they do? So that feels to me like a decent starting point, and I hope that that's kind of somehow at least a little bit answered your question.
It does. I mean, when you say it can be a good starting point, it does make sense. So taking your cue from here, my next question is for Jim. There is no school in the world that is better than its teachers. Teachers are the lifeblood of success of the schools. But teaching itself is a creative profession, as quoted by Sir Ken Robinson in one of his talks. However, in recent times, teaching has become more of how well a teacher's students perform in a test or an exam rather than how much they learn. So, Jim, how can we restore creativity and curiosity back in our teachers and teaching?
It's in many ways the key question, because there is this impatience, certainly with most people I talk to. There are a few more conservative people who really like this knowledge-rich, test-driven education system that we have. But most people want the change, and they're struggling to see how we get there. And my general sense is that we've got a misalignment between teachers' vocation and then what we're asking them to do. So it's a misalignment between the curriculum, our assessment system, and our teacher training. And so we have a curriculum that's knowledge-rich in most places. We have an assessment system that is just aggressively trying to assess that knowledge, in the same old ways they've always done. We're not drawing on assessment that we get from music and dance and art and so on, where we put the emphasis on assessors and their judgment to say how well someone's doing. And if we were to build the quality of our assessors and trust them, as we should trust the professionalism of teachers more, then I think we can in turn achieve a lot more. And then we need to be able to train teachers in doing more than knowledge delivery. And my worry about if we were to move quickly towards bringing more creativity, bringing more whole child education into schools, whether or not our teaching workforce are ready for that, because it's not that straightforward. Project-based learning, problem-based learning is in many ways harder than just delivering from a textbook or just delivering the knowledge. It's easier to keep young people's attention because it's way more interesting. So your behavior will probably improve, but keeping a track of everybody and working out how you relate that back to the curriculum, keep working out what context is going to work in what content is going to work in your context. All of that is quite hard, and we've got to be able to build the capacity of the teaching profession to be able to do that. And so, in arguing for a rebalancing, I'm not arguing for us to just shift in a revolutionary way really quickly. We've got to start to move very quickly, but move in stages.
Yes, move in stages, definitely. And change always happens in stages. There are incremental steps taken, and that becomes a movement. So thank you for that, Jim. Lee, so Ken was on your board, and both of you shared a love of creativity. Tell us about your experience and how your work with Ken Robinson aimed to help keep creativity alive in classrooms. You need to unmute the mic. Thank you.
My apologies. First of all, my work with Ken was based on a set of shared beliefs, and almost that were intuitive to us about how a joyful life should be led. And he was a bit of a rebel, to be honest. And I think by many people in formal education, I think Ken was seen as the ultimate rebel, because I think when I first met him 20 years ago, people were saying that his message was profound and wonderful, and this was way before TED, but was impossible to achieve. And I think if Ken has a legacy, in a funny way, it's not only his vision, but his courage in sticking to the message. And what actually brought Ken and I back together was, I shifted out of that old advertising career and went to Silicon Valley about 9 years ago, because I really felt that the world was changing around the axis of ideas, capital, and technology, and that revolutions could be built at that sweet spot. And I conceived of a product about 4 or 5 years ago that would allow us to use modern technologies to have a more sensitive understanding of every child in the world. And I went and sat down with Ken for dinner and told him what we were looking to build. And being the savvy operator he was, he said, look, when you're somewhere towards building this, let's get back together. And so about 2.5 years later, I went and sat down with him again in his home in Los Angeles and showed him the early stages of my platform. And Ken got very excited about it because it's based upon children having access to a very rich amount of knowledge through a screen-based interface, delivering books, photography, video, trying to embrace the fact that all children learn differently, and to allow them to explore knowledge freely, and until they would find things they were deeply captivated about. And that once they found that kind of individual focus and interest, the technology we've built would begin to understand the child and deliver content and experiences to that child that were not predicated upon their formal age, as education is designed, but based upon their capacity and their interest and curiosity. So Ken was very, very intrigued by what he saw, and one of the things that excited him was that a product of the platform we built is it can deliver very sensitive, unique data sets on every child to the parents and potentially to teachers. So, if you go back 20 years, Ken was saying education needs to change, schools need to change. Schools are not doing a service to our child. But something Jim talked about as well was, there's another person called the teacher in this. And, as I have done this journey over the past 4 or 5 years, I've met many teachers around the world in different school systems. And one of the things they say is teachers are under a lot of stress. Often in some schools, they'll have class sizes of 40 or 50 people. In the kind of slightly richer schools, it's less. But even so, teachers are driven by this kind of systematized approach to education where a sensitive understanding of each individual child as a creative individual is almost impossible due to the demands of time and also lack of tools. And though I built a product for consumers, what Ken was excited by was the application of our technology to help teachers. He felt that the kind of technology we built and the kind of data we create and the kind of empathy and understanding that fosters could play a role in a very healthy evolution of the classroom experience.
Interesting, very interesting. Dr. Graus, according to Sir Ken Robinson, the real role of leadership in education at national level, district level, and school level is not and should not be the command and control one. The real role of leadership is climate control, raising a climate of possibilities. How can this shift happen?
Carefully, first and foremost. Secondly, based on the child. We have come to the point where I think we need to, at least in our minds, very clearly distinguish between schooling and education. And schooling increasingly has become a set of rules in a certain place with a set content and set ways of finding out how things are. Because we've gone down this route over a period of time, and although I think it's been, certainly in the UK, it's speeded up in the last 10 years or so. I think we're now at a point where if you ask children, why do you go to school? They struggle with an answer beyond because I have to. And if you ask teachers what the teaching job entails, I worry that the answer we get is also not one of values and principles, but one of what I have to deliver and how I'm being judged. We also have a climate whereby we pass the child like a parcel. And we always blame the people where the parcel comes from. So I start when they're little, and then they go to primary school, and they're passed on. And then the primary school will say, well, where they've come from wasn't very good. So that's kind of our baseline's quite low. And then we work hard in primary school, and we pass them to secondary school, and the secondary school says, they aren't very good, are they? And then, but we'll make it work, we'll make it work. And then they go to university or to college, and then they'll say, well, they're not what they used to be. And then when they go eventually to the world of work, they're being told that they may well have the grades, but they haven't got the skills that we're looking for. So the whole thing seems quite dysfunctional in that sense, and not child focused, but institutional focused. So to come to your point about Ken's issue or Ken's point about leadership in education at all sorts of levels, it needs to be child focused and not institutionally focused. You just imagine being that child, that young person that is being bounced from one to the next, passed on like a parcel. So when we raise the climate of possibilities, it needs to be done around, and this can be done quite simple, sets of values and principles. Who are we? What do we stand for? What do we want to achieve with our children, for our children, in their communities and beyond? And that issue of getting children and young people in a position where they can write their own narrative of the possible and do that comfortably within that climate isn't just the climate of one school. It has to be the climate of the journey, and the same with the possibilities. So that leadership needs to be courageous enough to look beyond the boundaries of schooling and the building and actually follow the child. And that's where the investment needs to lie. And until we get that right, we will always be just managers rather than leaders of children's potential. And I think, like most things, they are easier achieved than we think. We've just got to make a start. We've not got to be frightened to make mistakes. And when we make them, we need to focus back on the children. How well do we know our children? As Tim Brighouse used to say to hordes of head teachers at conferences, how well do you know your children? And very often the response would be, we know all the estimated grades. And Tim would say, do you know what flavor crisps they're like? And I think once we get to the point where we know what flavor crisps they're like, then we are in a position where we can raise a climate of possibilities because we know who we're dealing with.
Thank you. So I love the fact that you said that it's easier done than said, although usually what we hear is easier said than done.
No,
So
I think just to add to that, I think it's a nasty habit of adults to overcomplicate things. We should learn from the kids how to do that. They're much better at it than we are.
Oh, yes, definitely, yes. So, Cris, my question to you, as a regulated health professional, you use research evidence in developing best practices for all interventions. What role does creativity play in your interventions?
So I want to talk a bit about research evidence and then how we could use that to develop best practices in schools on moving forward. Our pediatricians are telling us that children 0 to 2 should watch no screens, no exposure to screens, 3 to 5, no more than an hour a day, 6 to 12, no more than 2 hours per day. And that's because the brain is rapidly developing during those years. At age 12, a child's brain is 50% hardwired. So this we have to respect, and schools need to respect that children need a lot of other stuff than screens. And there's this tremendous focus. It's the flavor of the month. It's the bells and whistles, the wow factor of technology that is pulling everybody down. I call it the tech train. And I tell you, kids are falling off of that train and nobody's looking back to kind of even see that. We have 1 in 3 children are entering our school system developmentally delayed. These are Canadian statistics. 1 in 4 are obese. 1 in 6 have a diagnosed mental illness, and that's all causally related to screen overuse. So when we as schools use screens, we need to be very aware of that. And we need to employ research evidenced techniques. So when we're using screens, is there something out there that actually evidences that this intervention that you're doing is actually going to enable that child to learn something? And from that research, then we can create best practices. It's what I've been pushing, is that there's rules in schools around screens. And one of those is there's teach, take a break, teach, take a break. I mean, that's Kaplan's theory of attention. You get them outside. Kids can pay attention 1 minute per year of age. So a 7-year-old every 7 minutes should get a couple minutes of a body break, right? And that's what Charlie was talking about. There's the room you learn in, and there's the room you go play in. So, and what that does, it goes back to Jim, you were saying, we learn from the body up. We don't learn. We don't just teach to the brain. We have to look at a child's energy state. If they're low arousal, they need to activate their vestibular system and do some swinging, jumping, running. If they're high arousal, we need to activate their proprioceptive system and drain energy to get their energy in the zone to learn. So this is something that I really, really hope that schools move forward on. And the outdoor school concept of, I call it in-out schools, where half the class is in and half the class is outside, and then they switch at lunch, could be awesome. That is, I have piles of research that would evidence that particular intervention of a half-day outdoor school concept in enabling children to pay attention and to learn and to tap into their spirit and their creativity. Kids love to play. And when we allow that body to get what it needs, then we prime the body energy, and then they can access their brain for learning.
Okay, thank you. So,
can I possibly comment on what Cris just said?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Okay. I want to give you context on my own life. I had a daughter who went to Cambridge to St. John's and got a first-class degree, so she was kind of the proper brainy one. And I had a son who was constantly, I was told constantly that he would never make certain levels in education. He'd do quite well to get his GCSEs. And two things changed his life. One was picking up a camera, which led to an obsession with taking photographs, which then led to him understanding that he could make movies on a piece of technology, which led to him understanding the narrative and the storytelling of movies and how they're constructed, and developed in him an obsession with the music of Hans Zimmer. My son graduated with his Vice Chancellor's Prize from the British Institute of Modern Music last year with a first-class degree, and is one of the most wonderful composers of music you could ever meet in your life. And that is because he found a remarkable world of knowledge behind a screen, and he found software-based tools that allows him to compose music. So screen time in and of itself is not a bad thing. It depends on what is behind that screen. The screen is just a piece of hardware. The other thing, to your point, Cris, is the other thing that changed my son's life as a kid who was written off by his schools and everything till he was about 11 or 12 years old, was he went to a school that encouraged, a wonderful school in London that encouraged all boys to believe they could be on a team. And the day he made his rugby team for the first time, changed his life. It gave him confidence. He almost became as big as a rugby player because he made the team. And that was down to the fact that sport was seen by the school as something that created great values and confidence within a child and between children. So I support everything you're saying about that balance of physical and non-physical. But one of the things we must be very, very careful of is understanding that screen time in and of itself is not necessarily a sin, nor is it injurious if it's managed well. And the great thing about the world we live in is that almost every single piece of human knowledge ever created, or skill or capacity or ability developed, is embedded within knowledge that is freely accessible to people who have access to a screen. And I work on the board of a country in Myanmar, and in Myanmar they've gone through a digital revolution. They've gone from no phone to smartphone in 6 years. They've skipped the industrial revolution and digital revolution. That promises that through screens, we can elevate the sense of possibility and understanding of every single child in Myanmar who has access to a smartphone, and 80% penetration in rural areas in Myanmar now. So I just wanted to comment on what you're saying. So I'm very conscious of us making technology the enemy. I don't think it is.
But the New England Journal of Medicine in 2012 published an article saying that we are seeing the first generation of children, many of whom won't outlive their parents because of obesity related to screen time, right? So at the expense of a child's health and their mental and physical wellness, all I'm saying is that we need to consider those things and adopt the approach of balance. So we're using screens for this much time, and now we're going to go do movement, touch, connection, nature. We're going to do evidence-based things that are going to promote development and learning and creativity. So I'm not against screens. I use the word balance all the time. But when I go into schools and I work in schools, that's where I live, is what I'm seeing is an over-reliance on screens and a lot of kids sitting, sleeping, or climbing the walls because if you just talk to any child, ask Charlie about screens, right? He hates them. He hates this COVID learning model because he's a very active kid and he doesn't like being sedentary. So sedentary, isolated, neglected, overstimulated, those are 4 factors that are the result and the perils of screens. We just need to recognize those and develop some very stringent protocols for our schools to protect the children.
Yeah. Afshan, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I tend to agree with both Lee as well as Cris. So it's a difficult choice, but balance is the key word here, right? So as long as the 4 critical factors for optimizing child growth and success, which are movement, touch, human connection, and nature, are intact, and also then imagination, application, exploration. So if technology helps, I think it can be a win-win situation.
Mm-hmm.
But this question is to either of you. Is it even possible to provide our children with all these essential elements in the future, given with so many safety concerns and SOPs? Because Cris, you mentioned COVID-19, and Lee also was referring to the immense learning that is going on through technology. So this is an open question to both of you, or if the others can also pitch in.
Well, here's just an example. So in a classroom, when standing tables where 6 kids are around and they're doing a project, and I mean, they can have a Chromebook in front of them, but they're all collaborating. When you get kids standing, it activates 2 different systems that raise arousal. Standing tables, you have 17% more engagement. What is engagement? It's kids being creative, right? So I also advocate for having devices in classrooms, like a slam ball, which is a heavy ball. You pick it up, you throw it on the ground, it just dumps energy. So if the kid's cooking up, they could go down and see the principal for the umpteenth time, or they could do 20 slams, right? TRX, chin-up bars. So there's things we can do in the classroom to provide those opportunities for breaks when kids need them. I encourage classrooms to have a gas station, so that the things that build up their energy, an exercise bike, a tramp, or and also have a cave where they can go and chill if they're overwhelmed, right? Gyms, obstacle courses are awesome. Wilds, like, kids adore them. And in many schools, I've created a program called Crash and Bump, where we have all kinds of stuff that kids can play on, and it activates all the systems they need to build strong core, which is then, primary for motor coordination, for printing and reading. Playground, I see a poverty of interesting stuff. Kids like risk. In fact, it develops part of the brain that is actually essential for future success. So we've gotten too safe, and we've gotten into this no hurt policy. Nobody can get hurt at the school, right? We have to be keeping safe. And I see teachers saying the most ridiculous things, like, don't slide down that little bit of snow. You might hurt yourself, right? There's a huge focus on safety now, and it's really taken away. It's come at the expense of child development and learning. So really, we need to relook at the playgrounds, put some construction materials in the playground, put some wood and some hammers, let kids climb trees. These are all things that kids love. Building forts is the most desired activity for boys that I've ever seen. And think of the math components and the spatial concepts in building a fort and figuring out, how they're going to tie it together, and backing off, teachers backing off and letting kids go at it. is really my dream for future schools.
Thank you for that. And for that matter, it was very interesting to know that you are standing and attending this session, participating in this session. So that speaks volumes for walking the talk, probably, right? So thank you for that. Jim, I have a very interesting question for you. Sir Ken Robinson talked about disciplines rather than subjects. He said, and I quote, "Every world has the same hierarchy of subjects. Degrees aren't worth anything as the time passes. We need to think radically about human intelligence. There are three things about intelligence: it is diverse, it is dynamic, and interactive. Creativity is the original ideas generated through interaction," unquote. So, what steps can be taken to dismantle the hierarchy of school subjects?
I totally agree that we need to do that. And, you know, I'm speaking from England, where we are really wedded to the silos of subjects, and we really struggle to give people time, to give teachers and learners time to link things across. And currently, I'm working around climate change education, where we've got the opportunity to link together all manner of things, not just science and geography, which is where it's stuck in the English curriculum, but there's all sorts of other science and maths and humanities and English and creativity and service learning and outdoor learning that Cris has been talking about. There's so much just to be had out of that one really important issue that we're all facing in terms of our future. How do we do that? Well, I've got a good friend, Esther Wojcicki, who is a high school teacher in Palo Alto, who happens to have raised some very successful children as well. But she talked about a moonshot of education. One of the things Esther has done is she's been instrumental in helping Google develop Google Classroom. And she's inspired by their idea that you might have 20% time as a Google employee to work on other things. And so she's modestly suggesting in her moonshot for education that we allow 20% time away from subjects and towards more holistic project-based, problem-based learning. So that could be Moonshot Mondays. Her kids really like Moonshot Mondays because it makes them want to come to school on a Monday. And so it starts the week really well because they have much more power and self-direction over their learning, which they really like. They're pursuing things that they're passionate about. They're learning in their element. All of those things I would love to see. It doesn't have to be a single day. You could spread that over a week. But that notion as a start, that we would collapse the timetable, which is where those subjects are all enshrined, and do a different style of teaching and learning for a percentage of the timetable week, I think is a great way for us to get going on this. I think you're still muted. You're back muted again.
Afshan, you're muted.
Sorry again. Sorry for that. I just got so carried away with just listening to Jim, and I was saying timetable is the shackle that holds it all together. So that's food for thought. Dr. Graus, Reggio's Children's President, Professor Carla Rinaldi, says, "We must trust the children like they trust us." In schooling, is there enough trust to maximize facilitating the children's individual, contextual, creative potential?
I think it's too hit and miss. So again, I was talking earlier about the journey of their child from little to 18, and the parcels that you become. And I personally think, from observations over years in schools, that we have some very strange rules, and this is in the schools. We have some very strange rules that don't encourage children to paint outside the frame, to go outside the box, to think differently, because the rules are so set. And at times, I can think of a school some years ago that was brand new, a brand new build. It was a secondary school, and I went to visit the school, and I arrived at a huge gate, and it says press here, so I pressed there, and then the gate opened and it said walk this way, so I walked that way, and then I pressed on another door, and eventually I was allowed into the building. That the entrance looked like the entrance to the reception area in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And as I was there and turned round, there was a big sign that said no children. And the principal came down the spiral staircase, and I just said, when are you going to get some more in then? And he said, no, they have their own entrance and exit. And as I was shown through the building, by the end of the journey, I knew everything those children were not allowed to do. And I had no idea what they were allowed to do. And when I had lunch with a group of 14-year-olds and asked them about the very high fence around the school and what they thought about it and why they thought it was there, the answer I got was, it is to keep us in. And I think there are schools like that where you have to regulate when you can go to the toilet and those sort of things. And so there is a very clear lack of trust from the adult in the child. I don't think there's ever a great lack of trust from the child in the adult. And then you can argue that within the education system, there's no trust either, because the reason we have inspection regimes is because teachers aren't trusted, etc., etc., etc. So it becomes very difficult to embrace concepts of free thinking, creativity, calculated risk-taking, experience-based learning, all those. It's still possible, incidentally, but you're kind of sometimes swimming against the stream. And we have to sometimes remind ourselves that all those obstacles are man-made. And I mean quite often man-made, right? And maybe when we come to think about doing things better, we should start with ourselves and with the little things and try and ask ourselves some serious questions about the young people and what our trust relationship with them is. And so I'm very grateful for Carla Rinaldi's statement, because it certainly makes me think time and time again. I think we can create, to go back to Ken, much better climates that are much more conducive to bringing out children's creative potential.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. So we have about 8 minutes left, and I think we can take some questions. There are a number of questions that have been coming our way from the viewers. So thank you so much for that. And I'll just keep this open, whoever wants to go. One of the questions being asked is, what steps can be taken to end an outmoded industrial education system? Who would like to go first? All right, Dr. Graus.
I think I'm not sure about steps, because it sounds too much like planning and not trusting. So I think we've got to be a little bit careful with that. But I think one of the steps we could take is look at the opportunities that COVID has presented us with educationally. The fact that, as I'll be talking in another webinar next week, and Jim will be there with us, talking about assessment, quite clearly, not just examinations, not just testing, but looking at factors of the whole young person that we can take into account. A good friend of Jim and mine, Mary Afshan, who's the head of the international school in Ghana, Mary is talking about, I'm going to keep some of the online learning, particularly with the older ones, and I'm going to look at how I'm going to restructure my school to suit the learning of the children better. So we can take all sorts of steps, but we need to recognize that what sometimes feels like a disaster has actually presented us with a number of things that are well worth considering. And let's not lose some of the brilliant stuff that's happening because of the pandemic.
Afshan, obviously I agree with Go, I always do, but I would like to go to where Cris started right at the beginning about listening to children. And I think that could help us hugely. This post-industrial economy that we're in, this digital economy, is all about user experience and user design. What would schools look like if we designed them from the child's point of view and wrapped learning around individual children rather than getting them to conform to the rules that we thought up years and years ago? We can be creative in that, as system designers, as teachers, as school leaders, and really empower those kids and get things like service learning, where you've got children doing projects, doing enterprises with each other, for each other, is a direction of travel that is of our time. We know that at a societal level that neither communism nor capitalism has worked, and we're moving into an era where of social enterprise, and let's nurture that in our young people. Listen to them and give them and support them, give them the power to be able to do some of that right away, because they will bring a creativity to some of the world's problems that none of us adults have got.
True. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that input. So there are a number of questions, but
may I just comment on what Jim just said? Jim, the 4 or 5 points in what Jim said that are absolutely key to all of this, and the question itself is rooted in a kind of illness that we have as well. We criticize education by using kind of metaphor analogies, industrialized and whatever. What it is a system that was designed to serve society in a particular way at a particular time. And as Jim said, we're moving into a very, very different age now. And even the idea that learning happens in schools is going to be challenged, because we're going to need to have lifelong learning tools. And the society we live in today demands creativity and adaptation in a way that it didn't during the kind of formal industrial economy. We have to be more adept at allowing people to express their creativity, because if they do, the outputs of every single thing they're involved in their lives will become better. We will move the human race forward if we allow creativity to express itself. And so what we need is a system that allows expression and joy in creativity to be at the very root of learning. Because if people are creative thinkers, they will move everything forward. So we need to change the system. And it's not about being industrialized. It's just about the fact that education has to keep up with where history is taking us and where social factors are taking us. And that's what needs to happen. I actually have the great benefit of not being involved in education. I stand outside of it as someone who understands how systems and networks are built. And I look at it and I go, well, this is crazy, this archaic thing called education. This is not designed for today. And I think what needs to happen is this kind of Heideggerian critical distance to go back and say, how should the system be designed for a healthy future, for not just the individual child, but also for society? How can we create a rich, diverse, magnificent, creative society where education is at the root of that?
I think you have summed the discussion up. Cris, yes. You can
I'll try and be under a minute here, but I just so agree with what everybody's saying. But what's coming out in my mind is, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's not forget the 3 R's. I work directly with children. I've worked with thousands and thousands of children, and I have watched the erosion of the teaching of printing I've been in those schools for 35 years. And I sit down with these kids and I do printing output speeds, and they are so slow because no one's teaching them how to print. We cannot ask children to do something that they've not been taught. And the erosion of teaching printing has gone in direct line with the advent of technology, because many teachers tell me, well, they don't need to print, but yet they ask the kids to print every single day. And when they're doing math, or they're doing fill-ins, or they're doing their journals, and it is so hard for them. And if you want to kill the spirit of a child or kill creativity, just keep doing what you're doing and not teaching them how to print. So let's not forget, Charlie even said this, yes, we have to learn to print and read and do our math. But as we expand into hopefully more of the humanities and the arts and drama and music, and we start bringing these things back, let's not forget the core of Foundations for Literacy.
Absolutely.
I wish this conversation could go on for the next 5 hours.
Oh yes, I so wish to. This is actually getting interesting now, and there are so many questions, but the time is up. So with a heavy heart, we need to bring this to an end, with the promise that all the questions that have come our way, we'll address them at future forums. It has been a very interesting and stimulating conversation, and I'm sure our viewers must have enjoyed it as much as we did. I thank our forward-thinking panelists who all would agree that during this dark period of uncertainty for the world, Sir Ken Robinson's compelling message is all the more important. Let's draw on his deep sense of hope and optimism to help unleash the creative potential of our students and our teachers. Our future efforts will be the best possible way to honor the legacy of a man who fought for the future of every child on the planet. Thanks once again for joining us. I would like to thank our corporate sponsor, UBL, for sponsoring this event once again. And I would request my viewers to please stay tuned in for the next couple of days too, into 24 live sessions on SOTevent.com from today till 22nd November. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Lovely meeting you all.
Likewise.
Very good.
Bye.
Likewise.